And he said, but I want to give you your birthday present early. Would you mind? And I said, no. And Rucker said, well, it's not my birthday. He said, it doesn't make any difference. I'm giving you both the same thing. And so I thought, oh, this will be interesting. I thought we're each getting cars or something. And he said, are you ready? And I said, yeah. And he said, you're both fired. And I said, what did we do? Everyone was happy here a minute ago of what went wrong. He said, you're making more money than I'm making. I hope it's part-time since I'm paying you full-time to work for me during the day. And you obviously should quit and pursue this. If it fails, I'll probably take you back if I've got room. But you need somebody to give you some courage. And I just gave it to you. You're both fired. So Rucker and I got up as we hit his door to go into the lobby. He said, now remember, birthday dinner at 7, don't be late. And we were still welcome at the house. That's nice. So off we went. And 2 years from almost the day that I joined, I won a national sales contest. Rucker and I won.
The Intelligence Forge podcast is sponsored by Permassize AI Forge. The Intelligence Forge podcast is sponsored by Permassize AI Forge. At Permassize AI Forge, we know you're ambitious. But are manual tasks like admin, lead generation, nurturing, and onboarding holding you back from truly scaling your business? Imagine saving dozens of hours every week, freeing you to deepen client relationships and execute high-impact strategy. Our clients aren't just imagining it. They're saving countless hours per week and doubling their revenue within months. We custom-build AI automation systems that eliminate the grind. From effortless lead generation and nurturing to seamless onboarding, we give you back the most valuable resource, your time, so you can focus on building those vital human connections and driving strategic growth. Stop letting repetitive tasks limit your potential. It's time to build a business that works for you, not the other way around. Ready to unlock your true scaling power? Visit PermassizeAIForge.com and book your free AI audit call today to discover how you can save time and double your revenue. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Intelligence Forge YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode.
From prison chapels to global stages, how one sales legend turned a $14.95 book into a 10.5 million copy empire. Welcome to the Intelligence Forge. Today, I am honored to have a true living legend in the sales world. He's being called the #1 salesperson in every organization he's ever worked for. Training by giants like Napoleon Hill, Ziglar, and the rest. He's the author of the best-selling series on selling ever written, and a man whose impact extends far beyond the boardroom. Please welcome 𝐑𝐄𝐋𝐿.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming through. First, I would like you to introduce yourself to our audience about The Closer and what you do in your own world.
Well, The Closers is a book. This is The Closers Part 1. There is a Closers Part 6 being shipped now, and everything in between. 7, 8, and 9 are being written. So it's an expanding series, and later we'll get to how it happened, if you'd like. But I've been in selling. I guess the best way to say I was born into a family of salespeople. I'm 𝐷𝐄𝐋𝐿 III, and my father and grandfather both own their own businesses, and probably before that it seems to be in our blood. All of my aunts and uncles own their own businesses, and all those businesses were dependent on the ability of someone to sell something to somebody. So that's just the way I grew up. I was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, born in Massachusetts, but raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and 2 blocks out the front gate of East Lake Country Club, Bobby Jones' home course. And so I grew up around, if I had a lucky break, it was that I picked my parents carefully, was raised around successful people, those in our family and those 2 blocks down the street at East Lake Country Club, the chairman of the board of Home Depot and Coca-Cola and so on, were people that I knew. And I was allowed to sit at the big person's table so long, my father said, so long as you don't say a word unless somebody asks you a direct question. And if they do, answer with yes or no. don't go into stories and so on. So I just got to sit there quietly at the feet of many masters. And Dad said he could always tell when I was at the club, I had the rattiest car in the parking lot. Everyone else was driving Mercedes or Cadillacs or what have you, but there sat my little car. And then before that, my bicycle. So that's sort of how I got started. And I never made a conscious decision to be a salesperson other than I was going to be a salesperson because that's what everybody I knew did. And that someday I would probably own my own business because that's what everybody that I knew did. So my first sales victory was at age 11. They had a citywide in Atlanta, citywide contest selling Krispy Kreme donuts. My father taught me a little script: knock on the door, stand to the side. You're in the South, they all have screen doors. So they would open the door just a crack to see who was there. I was deliberately not standing right in front of them. And when they cracked the door, I handed them a dozen donuts and says, "Here are your Krispy Kremes." Will 1 dozen be enough? And just about everybody said, "No, that's fine." Somebody mumbled, a lot of people would mumble, "I don't remember ordering them." I said, "Huh." And I didn't respond to that. Of course, they hadn't ordered them. I just showed up on their doorstep. Well, enough people took the 1 dozen and paid for it. And enough people said, "Well, give me 2 while you're here, or 3 or 4 or 5. Because in the South, Krispy Kreme is a food group. It's not a donut. It's a separate food group. And everybody loves them. So I won the citywide contest. And Krispy Kreme was Krispy Kreme's time of the year. That's when they sold the most during this contest. And I won a 26-inch bright red Columbia bicycle, and for just knocking on doors and talking to neighbors. So I thought to myself, this is good. I like this. I believe I'm on to something. And I was the kid with a red wagon coming up your sidewalk selling Christmas cards or various, the things you could acquire through magazines and through the Boy Scouts and so on. So I was always selling something. The neighbors used to laugh if ''Ben'' comes to your door with that red wagon, get your wallet out. So I started there. And then one day in the summer, it was hot, as it usually is in the summer in Atlanta, and humid. I was sitting in the living room watching television. My father went out to play golf. And on the way out, he said, "What are you going to do today?" I said, "I'm not sure yet." At noon, after his first 18 holes or 9 holes or whatever, he reappeared at the house, and I was still sitting in the same place. And, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm just, watching television, getting ready." And he went away. And then when he came back at 5 o'clock, having played, I'm assuming, 36 holes of golf, I was still sitting in the same place. And he said, "We got to do something about this. You need a job." I said, "I'm only 14. Who's going to hire me?" And he said, "Well, you sell things. Here's an idea. Why don't you get a lawnmower and go around to the neighbors and offer to mow their lawns?" I said, "I don't have a lawnmower." He said, "There's one down in the basement. You may have noticed it. Our gardener uses it. You're going to get to use it." So again, he gave me a little script. Knock on the door, say, "Hi, I'm 𝐵EN'. I live at 75 East Lake Drive, and I'd like to mow your lawn." First, I went to the houses, looked like they needed it a little bit. And "You pay me what you think it's worth when I'm done." Well, that scared me to death because I said, "What if they underpay?" He said, "They won't. They'll overpay. They will pay more with that attitude than you would dare ask for it." So I mowed a few lawns, and sure enough, I don't remember what the price was back then. This is over 60 years ago, 70 years ago. Whatever the price was, let's say it was $2 or $3, they paid me $4 or $5 or $6, some 10. And I thought, this is really something. But it didn't change the fact that it was hot and humid in Atlanta, and I'm not a physical laborer by inclination. That's not what I really enjoy doing. So Dad came home from playing golf another time, and I'm sitting in the living room. He said, "What happened to the lawn mowing?" I said, "Dad, it's hot out there, and it's humid, and it's terrible," and so on. He said, "Well, you're going to mow lawns, but here's an idea. Hire some of your friends to mow lawns for you, and you sell the job. Knock on the door. Hi, I'm Ben Gay. Da, 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 da. We'll mow your lawn. You, at the end, pay us what you think it's worth. And then split the money with your friends. And I said, well, they're not going to work for half. He said, they're not going to work for half. They're going to work for more than they could get on their own, because you've got the courage to go up and knock on the door and sell the job, come back and inspect the job and collect the money. Well, he was right. People paid more, again, than I ever thought they would. My friends were happy to work for half because their half was more than they ever got on their own. Soon, in the growing season, I had 20, 25 kids working for me any given day, usually weekends, but whatever. And again, I lived in a successful neighborhood of successful people, many of them members of the club. I was making as much in the growing season as some of the adults were, mainly men in those days. The adult men were making. So now I'm hooked on selling ×2, both experiences, and I'm hooked on making money. I was able to make a good deal of money just talking to people, knocking on doors, selling the job, coming back, and if it needs a little cleaning up here or there. But that rarely happened because I inform my friends, if we have to call you back or I have to finish up the lawn, you're not getting half. So they did a good job to start with. I went from there to, I was a short order cook briefly in a restaurant, but I was then asked to manage it. Not the whole business, but the floor and the service given to people. So I was making money on tips and I was making money on salary. And so I did all the little piddly jobs you do, but it was mostly selling. And then one day a friend of mine said, he was coming out of high school, the front door, and I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Davison's, which is Macy's in Atlanta. They wouldn't call it Macy's because then the Southerners would know the Yankees were in town. So it was Davison's. He said, I'm going down to Davison's. My girlfriend works there, get a job in sales. And he said, do you want to come along? I said, sure. So off I went to, we'll call it Macy's. Off I went to Macy's, and I was hired to take back returns the day after Christmas. So, and that required 2 weeks of training for which I was paid. I found that interesting. I met a lot of nice people there. And the lady who hired me, Barbara Franz, said during my interview with her, I hope you do well. I'm going on vacation. I'll be gone 2 weeks, starting the day you're starting. Do you have any final questions? And I said, no, but I had just picked up a piece of valuable information. She wasn't going to be there for 2 weeks. So the day after Christmas, I took back returns. And the next day I went back and reported to the department that I had worked in briefly, housewares. And they said, oh, welcome back. We didn't know you were coming back. I said, oh, yeah. And inserted myself into their system. And by the time Barbara Franz returned from her vacation, I was head of stock in the housewares department. And I was in the stockroom working on something, and she walked in, and I saw her come in out the corner of my eye. I thought, oh, this isn't going to go well, since I wasn't supposed to be there. And she said, Mr. Gay. I said, yes. She said, nicely played. Wow. So I rose up through the ranks. I didn't become president of Macy's, but I rose up through the ranks and became the youngest buyer in their then 100-year history. I was the buyer in the department before I was legally old enough to sign orders. And although my job wasn't selling, I was the #1 salesperson. I've been #1 citywide selling donuts, but now I'm the #1 salesperson in the housewares department, one of the most important departments in the store, and their first buyer, the youngest buyer in 100 years. So off and running. And then a guy who was calling on us, a manufacturer's rep selling us cookware and all sorts of things, saw something in me and hired me to leave Macy's and go travel on the road with him. He said, you are old enough to drive, aren't you? Yeah. I'm over 16, and I went to work for him, George Freisum and Associates, and became their #1 salesperson. And I began to see a pattern. I'm good at this. And no one had really trained me yet. The training came later, and once I got someone who knew what they were doing to tell me what I should be doing, I really took off. And then Wednesday, so you can tell I'm a Southerner. This is a long answer to a very short question. Wednesday, September 15th, 1965, I was married, selling for my father, #1 salesperson there, as a food broker. But I was putting a wife through nursing school, paying her tuition. There wasn't a whole lot of money between that and then rent and so on. So I thought I need to make some more money. I picked up the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, thumbed through it, went to jobs, whatever that's called, and I went through it. I wasn't qualified to do anything. I couldn't type. I wasn't a philosopher. I wasn't an accountant, I went all the way through the help wanted, that's what it's called, help wanted section, and didn't find anything I was qualified to do. I could bluff my way in, but soon they would have discovered I didn't know what I was doing. As I went to throw the newspaper in the trash can, I saw a section called Business Opportunities. And I thought, I wonder what that is. I didn't know what a business opportunity was. And so I read the ad, and it said, if you know anything about marketing plans and want to make more money, dial this number. Well, I didn't know what a marketing plan was, but I did need to make more money. So I went into a phone booth. You may be old enough to remember phone booths made out of aluminum and steel. Walked in, closed the door, called the number, and a guy named Bill Dempsey answered the phone. And I said, this is Ben Gay with Brown Gay Food Brokerage. Well, the Gay and Brown Gay Food Brokerage wasn't me, it was my father, but I figured close enough. And I saw your ad, and I began interviewing him to see if he was worthy of hiring me. In about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm guessing, into my interview, he said, Mr. Gay, I'm not the man standing in a phone booth answering want ads. You are. Where are you right now? And I said, well, I'm on the corner or fork of Peachtree and West Peachtree Street. And he said, good, you're about 2 blocks from my office. Be standing in front of my desk in 10 minutes, or don't ever dial this number again. And he gave me the address, 1447 West Peachtree Street, Suite 300, Atlanta, Georgia. So I went skidding in. Business partner, later running buddy, high school friend Jimmy Rucker was working with me that day. He came up in front of the grocery store, and I jumped in the car like Batman and Robin and said, quick, 1447 Peachtree. And he said, what are we doing? I said, we're going to get rich. And the reason I thought maybe there was that, I didn't know what it cost to run a want ad, but I'd never run one. That was something other people did. So I figured it cost some amount of money. And this guy would run an ad hoping to get people to call. And when they called, he'd hang up on them. I figured he's got to be pretty successful to not care about his results. So I skid up in front of the desk of the receptionist. I said, hi, I'm Ben Gay. I have an appointment with Bill Dempsey. She said, yes, we've been expecting you. And from behind me, I heard, Ben Gay. Well, I already knew about Ben Gay jokes. You have a name like that. So when I go up in front of an audience doing a seminar, the first thing I say after they sit down, if they were nice enough to stand, I say, all right, let's get this Ben Gay thing out of the way. It's the elephant in the room, let's talk about it. So I hearing this person laugh, I turned around. It's a curly-headed guy, older than I was, but a curly-headed guy who had obviously answered the same ad I'd answered. He was waiting to see Bill Dempsey too. And I said, yeah, my name's Ben Gay. What's yours? And he said, Ziglar. And I said, with a name like Ziglar, you're laughing at Ben Gay? I'd never heard of him. He was 18 years older, but he had not had his first big hit yet. He was answering want ads. So we went in, Jimmy Rucker, my partner, Zig, and I went into what we all thought was a job interview. It turned out it was an opportunity meeting for Holiday Magic Cosmetics. And so we joined, $91.41, which I had to borrow from Rucker because we both worked for my father, made about the same amount of money. And that was payday. I knew what he was getting. I said, Jimmy, I'm married. I have bills to pay and so on. So what we need to do is take your money and buy a little box of cosmetics. Reluctantly, he said, fine. We started off the first 6 months or so, we didn't make any money. I'm not sure that we even sold a jar of cosmetics because I wasn't listening to this new thing called training, sales training. Okay. So then I started listening to Bill Dempsey. And rather quickly we made, and this is in 1965, when any figure I mention is a tenth of what it is now.
It's today, yeah.
Yeah. But we made $10,000 in a month. That's $100,000 today. And it was part-time. We were still working for my father. And then we making $100 a week each. So we began doing better and better. And then August 22nd, 1966, my father called me in his office. And he said, "How's that holiday magic thing going?" I said, "Well, we're doing pretty well." He said, "What are you making?" And I told him, he said, "Wow." That was making more than he was making. And he said, "Wow." He said, "Is Rucker here?" And I said, "Yeah, he's out in the lobby." He said, "Well, call him in here." So I called him in. He said, "You two are like, sewn together at the hip ever since we met in high school." And he said, "Tonight is Ben's birthday, August 22nd. He said, we're having a birthday dinner at the house. And of course, you're coming, Rucker. Don't be late." And he said, "But I want to give you your birthday present early. Would you mind?" And I said, "No." And Rucker said, "Well, it's not my birthday." He said, "Doesn't make any difference. I'm giving you both the same thing." And so I thought, "Oh, this will be interesting." I thought, well, he's getting cars or something. And he said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You're both fired." And I said, "What did we do? Everyone was happy here a minute ago of what went wrong." He said, "You're making more money than I'm making. I hope it's part-time since I'm paying you full-time to work for me during the day. And you obviously should quit and pursue this. If it fails, I'll probably take you back if I've got room. But you need somebody to give you some courage. And I just gave it to you. You're both fired." So Rucker and I got up as we hit his door to go into the lobby. He said, "Now remember, birthday dinner at 7. Don't be late." And at least we're still welcome at the house. And that's nice. So off we went. And 2 years from almost the day that I joined, I won a national sales contest. Rucker and I won it against another partnership. That partnership was Zig Ziglar and Mel Lanius. It was a year-long sales contest. Very bad idea. As soon as I had some influence in the company, I stopped that. Year-long sales contests are stupid because everybody suspects who's going to win in the beginning. In 6 months, they know who's going to win, and they quit working or quit being incentivized by the contest. But it was a year long. First prize was a mystery prize. Second prize was a Rolls Royce. Third was I think a Cadillac or a Lincoln or something, and then a Thunderbird and so on. So we're getting near the end of the contest, but I'm not a contest person. I do the best I can every day, all the time, and I'm not driven by it. But I knew we were doing well. I'm not stupid. We had the most people at the meetings, closing the most, and so on. So I heard that Zig and his partner were right there with us, and Jimmy and I. And the last day of the contest, and I'm not even sure that I knew this, Emmanuel, but it was the last day of the contest. Jimmy and I had an opportunity to go somewhere, Jackson, Mississippi, I think, and hold a meeting. So we did. Zig, thinking he'd won the contest, he was a contest-driven person. He loved pins, badges, and trophies and stuff. Zig had a victory party in Columbia, South Carolina for this sales contest. We went and held our meeting, sold X amount of stuff, and a couple of days later, the company called, San Rafael, California, Holiday Magic Cosmetics called and said, "Congratulations, you won the contest. So you've won the mystery prize." And Bill Patrick, the owner, William Penn Patrick, asked that you, Ben, come and accept the prize. And I said, "Okay." I said, "Rucker, do you mind?" He said, "I don't mind at all." He's a small town Southern guy. He had no desire to travel to California. That was like going to Mars. So I flew out and went to dinner with William Penn Patrick. And he said, "Congratulations." I said, "Thank you very much." Blah, blah, blah. And I'm sort of, do I get a Rolls or an airplane or what do I get? And he said, "You want to know what the mystery prize is?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You're going to be president of the company." I'm 25 years old. I don't know how to balance my own checkbook. And now I'm going to run a company that rather quickly after that was taking in $1 million a day, $3.5 billion a year adjusted for inflation. And I'm 25 and can't balance a checkbook. And I thought, but I was too stupid to know. I should have said, Bill, I'm not qualified to run this company. But I didn't know any better. Figure it out. I didn't know how to mow lawns. So you figure it out. So I went home and announced to my wife, she's passed away now. I have 30 years later, I have a wife I've been with for 30 years, Gigi. You'll hear about her frequently as we get to know each other better. But back then it was a lovely lady who later got cancer. And I said, we're moving to California. She said, why? She was sort of like Rucker, small town girl. And I said, I'm president of the company. She said, what? You don't know anything about makeup. Any woman who has makeup in her purse knows more about makeup than I do. I know how to sell. I know how to speak in front of groups and motivate people and so on. I was never a cosmetic expert, to say the least. So moved to California, and where I still am all these years later, and started running that business. I was the number one salesperson, obviously, because that's how come I got to be president. And I remain the number one salesperson, although that's cheating a little bit. When you're president of the company and you're standing in the front of the room, you get credit for a lot of sales that other people would have had a much harder time doing. So off we went. Looking back, when I stepped into that phone booth on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, I was really boarding a rocket ship and didn't know it. And when I dialed, we didn't punch buttons in those days. When I dialed the phone number, I was putting in the launch code. Because almost everything that I've done in my life, I can go back to then. I was attitude coach for the astronauts of Apollo 15, 16, and 17. I taught a seminar at San Quentin called People Built San Quentin, the California State Prison, how to get out of prison and stay out of prison. As a result of that, an inmate asked to meet me, but it turned out he couldn't come to the class. I had to go to him. I sat in his cell 3 times, each time for 3 hours. So I spent 9 hours up close and personal with Charlie Manson of the Manson family. I've met, and because of my position, Holiday Magic, you name anybody from that era, and many of them are still working like I am, and I know them because they were speakers and trainers and so on, and they wanted to get in front of big rooms and talk to people and sell their stuff. Well, I had the biggest rooms in the world. We did every night at 7:59. We've set it that way so people will be there on time for an 8 o'clock meeting. Every night at 7:59 local time, people stepped to the front of the room and said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm blah, blah, blah," whatever their name was. I'm a general distributor. My pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special meeting. In about, on any given night, 400 or 500 cities.
500.
Yeah. Well, we were in several countries, and then we had 5 different product lines, cosmetic lines, motor oil additive line, and so on. It's probably more than that. I tried to be modest when I said it. If you do 20 countries and all of their major cities and many of their secondary cities,
okay,
that's what happens.
I think you have a very interesting story to tell. And I mean, it's quite interesting how you get started, from one stage to another stage, from another level to another level. It looks to me that you are born a salesman. I think that's the way I can sum it up. Because if you said you were not trained at the beginning and you were still getting it right before you even get a formal training, I think it's safe, or it's okay to say you are born a salesman. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I think so. There's a book being written about me right now, and I hope Jason Williford, who's writing it, he's writing a biography. I've written or co-written or ghostwritten 35 books, not counting one that I approved yesterday to work on. So it's something over 35. But the gentleman who's writing the biography about me, we're arguing about what to name it. I want to name it Born to Sell.
I think that's a perfect topic.
Thank you very much. How much Ellen you said that.
Yeah, because really, like I just said, that it seems like you are just born into it. So it's like anything you sell, sells. So I think that's a good topic. You are born to sell. But thank you so much for sharing that. Let's move on. I see that you have a very rich CV. And I understood that you work, significantly as a volunteer in the prison at San Quentin and other prison with Your People Builders program. That's not typical for a successful sales executive. What are you looking for in prison? You're not going to sell anything to anyone in the prison, but that's really, some kind of, something not typical, different. But what drove you to that work? And what did you learn from those 11 years that impacted your sales philosophy from the prison work?
Getting to know people is the short answer to that question. Getting to know people up close, personal, inside. I know more about people that I met in prison and worked with than I know about some of my best friends. We don't need to go that deep with my best friends. Okay. At San Quentin People Builders, we had to, or you didn't get anything done. And the answer to your question, how did I do it, or how did it happen? Bill Patrick and I, William Penn Patrick, had a falling out, and I was retired at age 30 from running Holiday Magic. Okay. So I was exiled to Canada and then fired, so he wouldn't have a personnel problem right under his nose. He asked me to go to Canada to save the company up there, so I did. And 91 days later, I got a telex. Shows how long ago this was. A telex said, "You're fired. Pack up your stuff and come home." So I did. So now I'm 30 years old, a multimillionaire, sitting in a big house in Marin County, California, looking out over San Francisco Bay, thinking to myself, I got to do something. 30 is too young to retire. I don't care if you inherited $1 billion. It's too young to not have anything to do. There's the old saying, an idle mind is the devil's work job or something. Yeah, well, there I was. So I'm sitting up in my office one day, looking out over San Francisco Bay and the San Rafael-Richmond Bridge, which was sort of right in front of me. And there's this smokestack sticking up from behind a hill. And I was sort of, you stare at something, you're not really thinking about it, but you just fixated on something because you got to look somewhere. I'm looking at this smokestack, and slowly it dawned on me, that's part of San Quentin prison. I had to drive around the bay to get there, but still it was, it looked like a 9-iron shot from where I was sitting, longer drive. And so I thought, I got an idea. Why don't I sell them a seminar on how to get out of prison, stay out of prison, etc. I'd heard all the rumors about San Quentin. I'd never been there. So I called a friend of mine who knew everyone in Marin County. Margot Margarcian was his name. And I said, Margot, I'm thinking about offering to San Quentin State Prison a self-improvement company. It's called People Builders. Take people who are down and build them up. He said, that's a great idea. Let me call the warden. I said, you know the warden? He said, sure. Red Nelson, good friend of mine. A day later, I'm sitting in Red Nelson's office. And I'm quoting from memory because I just don't remember what I offered it to them for. But I think it was like $25,000, which would be $250,000 today. And I'd go over once a week and do encounter seminars. Had just sort of started. So I thought to myself, we'll teach it probably had to adjust the hours as it went on, but we'll start at 5 or 6 o'clock Friday night and teach to 5 or 6 Saturday morning, nonstop, sort of like EST, which was a spinoff of one of my seminar companies, the Forum, and Warner Earhart was one of our instructors. So I get the appointment, go over, sit down, explain it to Red Nelson, Warden Nelson, what I want to do and what it's going to cost. And he listened and said, I like it, let's do it. He said, so he buzzed his secretary. She came in and he talked to her. She went away, came back with a stack of papers I can't do it on camera, about that high. And he said, just fill these out and I'll push it through. Filling out a stack of papers salespeople don't like details. I like sweeping generalities from 30,000 feet and somebody else runs along behind the elephant and picks up the mess. So I said, well, okay. I said, now, what does push it through mean? He said, I'm excited about this. We can get it done in a couple of years. I said, a couple of years? You kidding me? I would make a good farmer if I throw down tomato seeds. I want to be eating tomatoes that night. I don't want to hear that it takes 9 months or whatever. So I said, 2 years? He said, yeah, I'm excited about this. I can get it done. And I said, what if I did it for free? He said, we could start this afternoon. So an hour after he said that, I was standing in front of 200 or 300 inmates. He picked up the microphone, made a prison-wide announcement. If you have prison movement, not everybody can just wander around, but if you have prison movement and you're interested in going to a self-improvement class, we've got a guy who's going to teach it, and it'll require 12 hours a week of your time, all night Friday night, which is interesting because you have to give up the good dinner. You wouldn't be there for the Friday night good prison dinner. You don't get to sleep in. If you've got a job on Saturdays there, you would work all night in the class and still go to work. There are all sorts of reasons you might not want to do this, but 200 people in 10 or 15 minutes are sitting there in the room. Primarily people of color, but not always. I'd say so. Young white millionaire walks into a room of a couple of hundred hardened people, or you wouldn't be there. San Quentin isn't where they put the newcomers. It's after you've had problems other places, or your crime was very serious to start with. So I walked in and had nothing planned beyond the name of the seminar and began talking to them. There used to be a program at Rahway State Prison called Scared Straight, where they would bring in youth that were starting to get off the track and about to get in trouble, and the inmates at Rahway State Prison would scare them straight. You don't want to come here, match them up with some guy. If you come here, he's going to be your boyfriend. So it was sort of scared straight in reverse. The recidivism rate throughout the California penal system back then was 67%. Means within 2 years of getting out, 7% were back. Once we had figures to work with, we had to be there 2 years to prove it. But once we got at 2 years plus, our recidivism rate, if you were a People Builders graduate, was less than 5%.
That's incredible, 5%. And you did this for 11 years in total.
Well, I did it for 5 years. Here's the punchline. The real purpose of the course was change your life, change your thinking, get out of prison and stay out of prison. Okay? At Lompoc, where I taught it for 6.5 years, I wasn't a guest who came in Friday night and left Saturday morning. I was an inmate. I had run afoul of some white-collar rules, and I had tax problems. So I fought it, a 1-year-long trial, longest trial in the history of the 9th District, West Coast, fought it and lost. And my attitude, being a good salesman, was all I have to do is convince one juror that A, it didn't happen, B, I didn't do it, but A, it didn't even happen, which is true. The crime never happened. So I figured I can prove that for one. Well, it turned out I couldn't. It was a year-long trial. They were out to deliberate for about an hour, and that included their free lunch for the day, and they came back and found me guilty. And the judge, he and I, we weren't buddies, but we ate in the same cafeteria at lunch. We nodded. I sat with him 25 feet of him for over a year, and he knew me to be a polite, nice guy and all. I thought, well, rule through the dice and I'll take my chances. So, and you had to do a third, roughly, minimum of a third, maximum 2/3 of whatever he said anyway. So I come back for sentencing, walk in, Judge, how are you? Mr. Gay, how are you? Blah, 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 some legal stuff. And then he said, Mr. Gay, you're one of the smartest people that's ever appeared in this court. And I said, thank you, Your Honor. And I think they're going to give me a testimonial dinner. So he said, it breaks my heart to sentence you to 15 years. What? And that was my reaction. What? I look around, I think they must be doing another case in here at the same time. And So anyway, off I went, not from the courtroom. They let me self-surrender a few months later, but from there I went to start my 15 years. And that's absolutely got to do 5 unless you stab a guard, maximum of 10 unless you stab a guard. I served 6 years, 1 month, 1 day, and 2 hours in Lompoc. But I ran their education department. I ran their regional warehouse during the day, and I taught people builders there 1 night a week for 6 years, 1 month, 1 day, and 2 hours. And it was probably, when people ask me what's the most meaningful thing you've done, I always answer my prison work. Because there, let me show you an example. This young man, Lamont Bowens, came to me at Lompoc and asked if he could go into the public speaking class. And I said, certainly, that's why I'm here. And so he joined, or the bottom of the subtitle is The Redemption of a Gangster. The night I met Lamont, when he asked if he could go to the class, he was 19 years old, about halfway, I'm guessing, through a 5-year prison thing because he was a drug dealer, had not graduated college, had not graduated high school, didn't have a GED, but through the miracle of the confidence you get when you learn to be a public speaker, which, by the way, a huge part of people builders at Lompoc and San Quentin is public speaking, getting them up, getting in front, getting confidence, changing your image of yourself to you. And so on. Lamont fell victim to that evil plot of mine, and we got him his GED. Then when he got out and I got out, he called me one day, and he'd become like a son to me. I didn't realize how much he took that to heart. Gigi and I have since adopted him, and we are mom and dad to Lamont Bowens. And he's a great guy. So he called one day, and he said, I want to go to college. And I said, congratulations. He said, I don't have any money. You know, I met you in prison. And I said, yeah. And he said, so what I'd like you and Mom to do is guarantee my tuition. He said, I promise you, Dad, you will never have to pay a dime, but I need a guarantee to get it. I said, we'll do it. I talked to Gigi and I said, we'll do it. He graduated from college. Took 5 or 6 years because somebody who hasn't been in a classroom their entire life takes a little longer than before. And then he got out, graduated, and he went to work at a law firm, served as the mail boy, mail clerk, and run around getting to know everyone in the firm. And people there took a liking to him and suggested he go to law school. So he called me. And he said, Dad, I need another favor. I said, what's that? And he said, I want to go to law school and I need a guarantee. I've got the recommendations. I can get in, but I need a guarantee for the money. I said, we'll do it. And so we guaranteed his law school. Never had to pay a dime. I seem like I'm a benevolent philanthropist. Never paid a dime for his college, never paid a dime for his law school. Not too long ago, it's probably been a couple of years ago, he called and he said, Dad, I need a favor. I said, oh, God, how much is this one going to cost me? He said, this is just a letter. I want you to recommend me for the judgeship I've been put up for. They're starting a new court for youth offenders, sort of like he was. So he wouldn't be a district judge or something like that, but he'd be a judge for young people in a youth court in the federal system. He'd be a federal judge. So I wrote the letter, and we haven't heard back yet, but he's got to get it. And if he does, I would love to be sitting in the courtroom when some young punk says, well, Judge, you don't understand.
Wow, that's really hilarious.
He does understand. He was in a gunfight. It was only a couple of shots, but that's a lot. He was in a gunfight with his stepfather. I mean, he came up in a different, I'm born 2 blocks out of the front gate of East Lake Country Club and hanging out with the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola. He's in a gunfight in San Diego with his stepfather. Different paths. But educationally, I'm still a high school graduate. He's a graduate of law school. He's a lawyer with 3 offices, New York, Dallas, and Delaware. I think Delaware. 3 offices, and he is Mr. Bowen. And he sent me a few months ago, it might have been a year ago, this kid who'd never been out of San Diego, didn't have a high school education, didn't have an education of any kind, sent me a picture of him on a camel in Dubai with one of his clients, I assume is the reason he was there. He's again, what are you proudest of in all you've done? I've had an interesting life.
You've made an impact in the life of people also.
I have, but my real impact wasn't running a million-person cosmetic company. It was 200 people in a room at San Quentin for 5 years.
Changing their lives.
Yeah, and at Lompoc, it was, again, a couple hundred people. And the education work I did, just getting people their GEDs and so on. But mainly at Lompoc, it's Lamont Bowens. Gigi has even said, if it hadn't been for you going to Lompoc, there probably wouldn't be a attorney, Lamont Bowens. So it was worth it. And I said, well, that depends on if you're the person who had to serve 6 years there with him. Hindsight, it's worth it. If somebody said to me, we're going to lock you up for 6 years, 1 month, 1 day, and 2 hours, but you're going to have an impact on this guy's life, I had to think about that.
You have a lot of incredible story. It just looks to me like everything you touch, it doesn't matter. There's always some positivity coming out of it. But thank you so much for sharing that. Let's move on. The magic one question is one question everyone gets to answer. Probably 60 seconds, you can just answer this. If you have a magic one today and you could instantly improve something about how sales professionals operate today or about your own business operation, what will it be and why?
For me, as I say in my prayers every morning, every evening, I thank God for the opportunities He's given me. I apologize for not taking full advantage of many of them. I apologize for my many sins and weaknesses. But what I ask Him is every morning, every night, I say, and Lord, please keep working with me to make me a better, stronger, kinder person, one filled with gratitude for all that you have done for me. So that's what I would wish for me. For the rest of the world, I would go to the cliches. I would pray for peace and understand. If I was the benevolent dictator of the world, which was not a bad idea, really, I would say, for openers, freeze. Every piece of land you have for right now, you can keep it. You're not taking another inch. Freeze. Now, put down your guns. I'm not going to ask to disarm you. I'm not an idiot, but put down your guns. Let's go to work to build your economy, your country, and turn it into a better place, as Rodney King said after his beating in Los Angeles and so on. Can't we all just get along? Because there's so much that we have here in the United States, we tend to understand that better. There's so much to have and enjoy and so on. We don't need other people's stuff. So peace.
Yeah. You're right. And I think I once hosted a man on the podcast also. He's into cybersecurity, infrastructure, and the likes. And he told me, and I asked him rather a question to say, how do you think we could stop cyber attack in the world? And his answer that he told me was, the only one way for us to stop cyber attack is if we could share love amongst ourselves, everyone in the world. And I said, yeah, I think I agree with you. Truly, just like you say, if we decide to pursue peace at all cost, if we love ourselves, if we share love, if we are not thinking bad of anyone, I think we can live together peacefully. But I agree with you. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's move on. Now, this is a very important question that I want to ask you. The Dead Sea Scroll of Selling. You've told the incredible story of finding the closers. Poorly written, poorly printed book that you bought for $14.95 from a Wall Street Journal ad. Walk us through that moment on the plane to LaGuardia Airport when you realized you found the Dead Sea Scroll of Selling. What did you see that others miss? In that
great question. The book he's referring to is now called The Closers Part 1 and looks pretty good in my opinion. Back then it was just called The Closers, and it looked like it had been put together by raccoons who broke into a print shop perhaps.
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you have the copy of the whole copy?
Somewhere, but I haven't seen it in a long time. And I ought to get it because I would love to hold the two books up in front of you. And if someone out there is listening and has the old closers, when it just said the closers, it was a pale blue cover, and it had not yet been approved by the National Association of Professional Salespeople, didn't have the seal on it. If you got one, contact me because I'll buy it from you. But I right now can't reach around all the books within easy reach and find one, and haven't in quite some time. But the reason that we had it was I had the good fortune to come up with the idea of a nationwide toll-free answering service, an order-taking service, the first call center in the world. And the reason no one else had come up with the idea was 800 numbers were very expensive, and you had to pay in advance, and then you had to pay overtime, and so on. So it prohibited any one person from getting an 800 number and using it in his business. Only huge companies did it, Xerox, for instance. And they didn't use it to talk. They used it to communicate data at high speed late at night. So anyway, I'd had the good fortune of working in the timeshare business, vacation ownership, hence The Art and Science of Resort Sales by Ben Gay and Dennis McCann. And I found out what their secret was. They took a room and sold it to 52 people a year, timeshare, and usually in very nice places that most people who bought a timeshare a week couldn't have paid to buy the whole thing. They were timesharing. So I timeshared an 800 number. Still have the number, 800-824-7888. Used to get, towards the end of that business, 86,000 phone calls a day to that one number, shared by 1,500 corporate clients. But in the beginning, when I came up with the idea, I also quickly discovered most people didn't know what an 800 number was. They didn't know it was free to them to call. So I had to educate a country to start with what it was, and then educate them to our business, the National Communication Center, et cetera, and then sell individual clients on putting that number in their ad or on their business card or what have you. So I assigned different publications to everyone who worked for us, 150 some odd people, and they were to find ads that didn't have an 800 number, clip them out, send them to word processing, which started a 6-letter series why you ought to have an 800 number. Mine was, that I was assigned, was the Wall Street Journal. And so one day I'm looking through the journal and I see this little poorly written ad. I wasn't even sure what it was about. The only thing I liked about it was it didn't have an 800 number in it. So I clipped it out, was going to send it to word processing, just start the letter series. And then I was reading it and it said something about closing. So I thought, I wonder what that is. And then they had $14.95 in the copy. I guess they're selling something. It wasn't clear they were selling the book. So just on a hunch or whatever, I wrote them a check for $14.95, clipped that to the typing request, sent it down, and never gave it another thought or manual. If the book had not come, I wouldn't be having this conversation about it. I wouldn't have known, wouldn't have cared. It was just something I did yesterday. The book shows up. It looked like it'd been put together, as I said, by raccoons. I flipped through it, pages shot out, and I thought, God, I mean, this is terrible. So I get down, I'm gathering up the pages, getting ready to throw them in the trash can, and I'm cheap. So, and it did say the closers on the front. So I put a rubber band around it, threw it in my briefcase, thought I'll read it next time I'm on a plane with nothing else to do. Back then, we didn't have movies every few minutes. You read the in-flight airline magazine, and then you brought a book with you. Well, that was my book. Reading through it, appreciate you remembering that, I had found the Dead Sea Scrolls of selling. Poorly written, bad grammar, misspelling, pages printed upside down, not stuck in the book at all. And the envelope it came in today, if I got an envelope like that, I'd call the bomb squad. I would not rip it open. So, but I read it and thought, this is really something. I got to get a hold of this and get the rights to it. I went right to, in my mind, the rights to it. So we land at LaGuardia. I go to a payphone. I've had good luck with payphones in Atlanta and LaGuardia. I go to a payphone, and the guy who answered the phone, I said, "Hi, I just finished reading The Closers, and I want to talk to somebody." And he says, "Well, Mr. Gay, how are you?" And I'm looking around, I said, "I didn't say my name." He said, "Oh, I know." But he said, our partner wrote the book. We printed 500 copies. He ran an ad one day in the Wall Street Journal. We sold one book. So if you've just read The Closers, your name is Ben Gay. You live in Placerville, California. Long story shorter, we had a nice, pleasant conversation. I agreed. I said, "How many do you have left?" He said, "Like I said, we printed 500. We sold one. I don't have to count them. I have 499. You want them?" So I brought the 499, and loosely in that conversation, it had to get a little more formal, got the rights to rewrite the book. On the cover, everybody says I wrote The Closers. On the cover, down at the bottom, it says Ben Gay III, editor, because I didn't. And in the first few pages, it says who allegedly, I don't even believe that now, who allegedly wrote the first draft. And so we cleaned it up. I had a distributor organization already selling our cosmetics and other things, fed it into that, and turned it into the best-selling book about selling and closing ever written. Sold 10.5 million copies when we quit counting 30 years ago. I don't know how many millions we've sold now, and there's a Closers Part 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on. The luckiest ad I've ever clipped out, except if you know anything about marketing plans and want to make more money, call this number. The 2 best ads I've ever reacted to.
Wow. What a journey. What an opportunity. I'm just looking at this opportunity in this age and time, how this could feel. But really, you spotted gold and you went for it. And the rest is history. From one book to 10 million copies and more, like you said, you stopped counting some years back. The original author sold one book. You've sold 10.5 million copies and created a 7-part series. What was the secret? Was it the content? Is it the marketing? Is it your credibility or something else entirely? How did you achieve this big thing?
Well, sort of all of the above. I look like a comedian, my hair all of a sudden. All of the above in a way. I was reasonably well known in selling to start with. So when I endorsed the book and said this is the best book on selling ever written, a lot of people believed me. And when I told our distributor organization I didn't know that a book, the average book, prints 500 copies and never asks for any more. So it's not that they sold 500 copies. If they did, they ordered more books. They sold something less than 500 copies. They've still got some in the garage or warehouse or whatever. I didn't know that. So when my purchasing agent, who knew nothing about publishing, and I didn't either, came to me and he said, "How many do you want to order?" once I got it rewritten. And I said, "Well, I don't know. What's the best price you can get?" He said, "Well, there is no better price past 50,000 books." I didn't know. The truth was 500 or less. And I said, "So that's his." Yeah, he said, "We order 100,000. It's the same price as 50,000. I said, "We'll get 50,000 then." A couple of years later, I found out the figure I should have ordered was 500. But the good news was when you got 50,000 in the warehouse, you're inclined to want to sell them. So I pushed it a little harder than I normally would, talked about it in the seminars I was given. I've given 5,000 plus paid appearances, talked about the closers at every one. And then you ask, what made that possible? Well, in the beginning, Ben Gay says it's a good book, got it up and running. Now I get speaking engagements and a lot of consulting. I do personal coaching, talking to people like you, one-on-one, coaching them about personal development, sales, marketing, business in general, and so on. Somewhere it flipped. I started getting speaking and consulting and coaching engagements because of the closers. So now I say that the closers has been my passport to credibility. So it's some or both. The closer wouldn't exist if I hadn't found it. On the other hand, I've given hundreds, if not thousands, of the 5,000 speeches because, to a degree, of the closers. If I want to meet people in a hotel or get attention on a plane, I'll carry the closers like this in front of me.
Yeah.
People will say, "Excuse me," and then they look at the book. "Are you 𝐷𝐄𝐒?" They didn't notice me when I came in, and I have friends when they go to a timeshare resort. I lend them this book, The Art and Science Resort Sales. I said, just carry it where they can see the front of it, because what they know about selling, they got out of the closers and or The Art and Science. And they'll start talking to you and then look down at the title of the book and just say, 𝐷𝐄𝐒 is a good friend of mine. I said, the heat will come off of it. Now, if you want to buy it, buy it. But if you don't want to buy it, just keep the book where they can see it, because they know that you know every word they're going to say to you.
Interesting. Thank you so much. The speaking business evolution, which you mentioned, briefly, I just want to touch on that. You going from 300 seminars in a year at various price points to now doing just 12 per year at about 20,000 each. And you also do maybe Zoom, seminar for just like $29.50. Okay, that's a masterclass in value positioning. How did you make that transition? I know you talk about because of your credibility in closer, and then you could be able to speak, but was this the thinking behind the essential pricing yourself out of availability?
To a degree, it was. Earl Nightingale, dear friend of mine, till he died, The Strangest Secret. I can't believe how young he is in that picture. He and Zig and I were all starting out. Earl had a jump start on us. He was already hosting Our Changing World, the most listened to radio program of the time, heard daily on over 700 stations. But he was a radio guy. He was not I want to go give a speech guy. So he said happiness to him was sitting in a studio reading something he'd written the night before with an audience of one, his engineer he'd worked with for years. He said, that's when I'm happiest. Put me in front of 5,000 people, I'd rather die. He just didn't like. When they shot a movie of The Strangest Secret, they had to use a 3-camera setup and fade from this camera to this camera to this camera to give him the appearance of movement, because he just grabbed the lectern, looked into the teleprompter and talked, read it. He hated it. So we started out, Earl, Zig, and I, and they were both older and more experienced than I was, but that's where I met them. They both wound up working for me at $300 a talk. I got up and did a talk one day for about 6 hours in the Holiday Magic sales meeting when I was just a distributor. Zig came in and did biscuits, fleas, and pump handles. That's his 3 most famous talks that he got, stories that he got started with. Didn't take him an hour. I'm back up front wrapping up the meeting, and I see Bill Dempsey reach in his coat pocket and hand Zig a check, an envelope. But I know the look of money changing hands. So I wrapped up the meeting quicker than I normally would have, followed Zig down the hall. There was a coffee shop in that building that we had joined the business in. And I said, Zig, let me buy you a cup of coffee. We haven't spent any time together. He said, fine. We went in. As soon as we got settled, by the way, just to keep Bill Dempsey honest, how much did he pay you? I didn't know you could get paid for a speech. I just had a feeling that's what I had just seen. And he says, I don't know. Let me see. And he opened it up. He said, yeah, $300. Today, that's $3,000. It's more than that, because that was a lot of years ago. $6,000 today. But he said, yeah, $300. How much did he pay you? I said, the same. Well, he hadn't paid me anything because I didn't know you could get paid for a speech. But I had just given, except for prisons, churches, and schools, I had just given my last free talk. That's what he taught me. So from there, it just grew, raised his price to $500. So Zig and I did too, and, so on. And then one day, I think he got up to $1,500. And I said, Earl, what are you doing? $1,500. He said, I'm trying to find the price at which they will leave me alone. He didn't want to give a talk at any price, but he had to have an answer to the question. We used to laugh because to get Earl, when he was doing seminars for me, to get him up on stage, it took whatever his asking fee was by that time, and a double bourbon. He talked best with in front of a crowd with a double bourbon, having just consumed a double bourbon. And so that I sort of started doing the same thing. And as I've gotten older, travel has lost its allure. There are lots of places in the world I haven't been. I've been to lots of places, but there are lots of places I haven't been that I'd sort of like to see if I could shut my eyes and be there. I'd like to see the Great Wall of China, if only to say I've seen it, But I know what it takes to get to the Great Wall of China, so I will never see it in my lifetime. I have no desire to do what's necessary to get there. So I just started raising my fee like Earl had taught me years ago. And then I found out that wasn't working like I'd hoped. So I continued raising my fee, but cut back the number of available dates. I went from 300 plus, as you know, to 12 and raised the fee to $20,000. Domestically, though, that does include airfare, hotel, and all this, a package price. And then people say, well, how do we want to get your stuff? So I started doing podcasts. We have one of the top podcasts in the world, top 1.5% in the world, that I share once a week with Denise Griffith, my co-host. She started it. I just joined her. She's been at it 18 years since podcasting began. So I do that. And then I do podcasts for free. It's good exposure for me, helps nice people like you, etc. Yeah. Now, if you want me to do a sales training session, you said $29.50 earlier. That's $2,950, not $29.50, like $30. But I do sales training. It would take me a day to fly out and do a seminar with you for $20,000. If I get to sit here in my office looking into a lens, I'll do that for a day for $29.50. Most people don't want to do a full day on Zoom or whatever. So I give them 20 hours that they can use any way they want. Personal coaching, the seminar, some podcasting. They get 20 hours they can do with as they wish. And I get the joy of not having to travel. I don't have to spend a day getting there, a day getting home, the backlog of work that piles up in the meantime. So I'm a happy camper.
All right. Thank you, sir. I just want to ask 2 questions, but I will put it together in one, if you can sum it together. Now, I wanted to share one of the best client transformation that you have witnessed, that someone who applied the closer principle in the book and got remarkable results. I know you should have a lot, but I want you to share just one. What was the issue they faced? What's the solution from your methodology that helped them break through? That's the one part of the question. And then following up on that success story is, what are you doing currently to help more salespeople and organizations to achieve? I know you say you're doing speaking, but is there any other specific things that you are doing that is also that you're using to help the salespeople?
Well, I just approved. I've always said, not always, but recently I've said 35 plus books. Again, like speaking, it's 5,000 plus paid appearances. And we did that based on how long you've been at it, how many did you do a week, or, whatever. It's not like I have a list of 5,000. It may be 6,000 or 7,000. The books, I'm pretty close with 35, and yesterday approved the 36th one in the series, in my series, and the closers were up to 7, 8, 9 are being written as we speak. So how do I help people? Here's the real truth. It's books, podcasts, live seminars, recorded seminars, and so on. But the real secret, and it's also the secret of the Closers Part 1. Some people don't like the Closers Part 1 because it's too blunt. It explains selling the way it really is, not the way they wish it was. So it's the kicks, the blocks, and the punches of selling. The Closers Part 2, which I did write by myself on a legal pad, but The Closers Part 2 picks up where Part 1 leaves off and shows you what sophisticated people really do with that information. Jimmy Rucker was, and in the back of this book is on page 257. The bookmark is in it at page 257. There's a chapter called Sales Infiltration. That is the best thing, and I say this humbly, ever written about selling. It's selling. It's what the master closers really do. You got to know what's in Part 1. It's like you got to have, 50 tools when you start out to be a mechanic. When you're a master mechanic, you're down to about 8 tools because you know exactly what you need for this job and that job and so on. And you have multiple uses for various things. Someone told me, I don't know this, but in the closers books, there are over 300 specific closes. You say, they say, you say, etc. I have one close I use for real. Now, I set it up. I set the table properly so that the people buy, term I coined years ago, people buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. So I spend my time making sure they know, like, trust, and feel safe with Ben Gay, and that I've listened with a capital L. I've listened to what they said and what they are looking for and so on. So it sets me up to be able to say, and I have an 86% closing rate on significant sales, not taking a book order, but significant sales, an 86% closing rate. And I'm within 1 or 2 points to that up or down all the time. And I hit that pace 40 years ago. But with my 86% closing rate, here's the close I really use. And based on what you've told me, here's what I suggest we do. And then I said what I think you should do. Manuel, if I've heard you correctly, here's what I suggest we do. Notice we, because I've combined Team A, the salesman who's out to get the dollar, to Team B, the customer who's defensive because he knows I'm out to get the dollar, into Team C, 2 people working together to take advantage of a mutual opportunity. And if it's not right for you, I won't recommend it. People say to me, you could sell ice to Eskimos. I said, well, I guess I could, but I wouldn't. Assuming they had plenty of ice, I wouldn't. So the secret then for me is absolute honesty up to and including you're not qualified to buy it because it's too much money for you. I don't want to take that much money away from you on the chance this will solve all the problems. You're geographically not in the right place. Might be one. It could be religious. It could be a number of things. I had a guy come up to me, he was a Sikh, and he probably know instantly, can you picture a Sikh as soon as I said that? Okay. He came up to me and said, I'm having trouble relating to people. Can you tell me why? And I said, yeah, you look like a terrorist.
Wow.
He said, no one's ever said that to me. I said, well, they haven't said it, but they're thinking it. I said, I heard that there were a group of Sikhs in here today. You guys are the nice guys. I know that. So here's your opening. And often the opening is more important than the close. Because first I want you to know, like, trust me, and feel safe with me. Your opening should be, hi, my name is, I know his name, but I won't say it. And I want you to know that I'm a Sikh. We're the good guys. I'm not a terrorist. And they laugh, and he laughs, and the problem is put away. J. Douglas Edwards, the great sales trainer who trained my generation, most of us started training from Doug Edwards. I wrote a book called Sales Closing Power after he died. He didn't write a book, oddly enough. In here are a couple of really wonderful tips, and one of them is probably among the most important. If you have a built-in objection to your product or service, bring it up first and brag about it. Don't have it hanging over you like the sword of, I never can pronounce the 𝐑𝐄𝐋𝐿, whatever it is. The sword, don't have it hanging over you. When I go on stage, they read the introduction I wrote. It's a good introduction. If you read it well, I get a standing ovation. And I tell them, don't wing it. Read it just like I wrote it. It's proven. It's been given over 5,000 times. It works. I go on, I get a standing ovation because the script is good, my reputation is good, and they know and like the closers.
Wow.
As they sit back down, I say, let's get this 𝐵𝐃 thing out of the way. Because they're all thinking that. Why not clear the decks? I know I have a funny name. You know I have a funny name. You're too polite to say it. I'm not. You look like a
You just put it on them once and for all.
I talked to people at British Motors in San Francisco. They sell, among other luxury cars, they sell Rolls Royces. And I taught them to say, when they meet somebody for the first time, hand them your business card. I know that it makes me sound old-fashioned, but business cards are highly effective in addition to putting your stuff in their phone. And hand them your business card and say, you know, my name is 𝐵𝐃. One of the great things about working here is meeting the kind of people who've done so well in life, they can invest $350,000 in a car. So I get to meet wonderful people. What have you just said? No one wants to discuss that the starter kit is $350,000. But if we don't, we have that hanging over us. If we don't mention it and you don't have it, all I'm doing is wasting your time and making you nervous. So no, it's a pleasure, an honor to meet people who've done well enough to have $350,000 to spend, invest in a fine automobile. And then I watch their eyes, and if the eyes don't dilate and they don't throw up in the back of their throat, they're probably qualified. But to answer your original question, and you've asked Southerners, questions, it's your fault. The answers are long. You don't ever ask a Southerner an open-ended question. To answer your original question, both throughout the closers, but especially in the closers part one, and especially when I'm doing sales training with you in person, over the internet, whatever, my secret is I tell the truth. And because they know the BS, you know, why would you do that? So why don't we just shock them with the absolute truth? This is an expensive product. You know, somebody calls me, I want to have you come in and talk to us. Super. I'm booked out 2 years in advance, but I'm susceptible to special stories. Tell me yours. And that occasionally will generate a 13th or 14th seminar if theirs is a really good one. And another one is, do you have a corporate jet? I hate commercial flying. If you have a corporate jet, I've got an airport 3 miles from my house. That will ease up things. If they don't have a corporate jet, they probably don't have $20,000 to spend on a seminar either. You see what I mean? But it's just surprisingly blunt. I was watching your reaction when I told the guy, you look like a terrorist. And you did like that. Well, they do too. I've only used that 2 or 3 times, always to find out their seat first. They seem to be the good guys. But tell them the truth. Napoleon Hill, when he worked for me, told me one time, I think he saw me talking to one of my yes men. You know what a yes man is, right? I could say the stupidest thing on earth. They'd say, yeah, boss, that's right. I'm with you, even though they know you're an idiot. He took me aside one time. He said, Ben, always have people near you who will tell you the absolute truth, no matter what. And he said, it's just the most effective way to communicate and learn things. Well, I had one. She started out as my secretary, then she became my executive assistant. This wasn't a big name change. It was just the evolution. And then she became my chief of staff. And if you wanted to sell something to me, you had to first sell it to Marty Conley. Martha, wow. But Marty. And she was one of the first, other than my mother and father, she was one of the first people who would shut the door and say, Ben, you're full of bull.
Thank you.
I remember the first time, 2 or 3 times that happened, I went, well, I'm 𝐵𝐃. I'm the boss. I'm the president, so on. She said, that's all true, but you're full of bull on this point.
Thank you so much. What keeps you up at night? What is one challenge that you think in your organization or in your business you would like to solve that probably you're still looking for a solution that keeps you up at night?
Nothing.
If there's any.
I follow the daily success system that Dr. Napoleon Hill helped me develop. We developed it together, and I follow it religiously. And therefore, when people say, what are you going to do in the future? I said, I don't know. I have to check my book. And here's my book, 2000 Diary. And I come in the morning and I open it up. And the most important thing it said here today, highlighted in yellow, was 10 a.m., Emmanuel King. Say, I don't have to Gigi asked me last night, do you have any podcasts tomorrow? I said, I don't know. My book's in the office. If you're there, look in it and see. Because I don't have to remember I have a podcast with you. It's in the system. I don't have to remember when we're going to take a long weekend. We take 4 a year and go over to Mendocino on the Northern California coast. Because the first thing I do when I get my new calendar each year is I open it up and she and I put in it the 4 days we don't have anything else to do. So all it says is Mendocino, highlighted in yellow, nothing else on the page for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we have a date night once a week. We may have several dates during the week, but we have one for sure, Friday night. Nothing else interferes with that. And I do podcasts, Denise Griffith, Wednesday, 10 a.m. And Mark Harris, my partner in crime in another business, 12 p.m. Don Cody, regarding a new book we're doing with him. It's the 36th book I was referring to the other day. Yep. And I'm going to be talking to him about that. And then there are things I do every day, but they're written on the page every day. And at the end of the week, it says, after those important ones, move up. Denise Griffith, when we're through talking, says move up Wednesday. That means don't cross it out until you've moved it up to Wednesday. Now, I know Wednesday at 10 o'clock, I don't need to write that in a book, but I do need to write that in a book because that's how I run my whole life. So what keeps me up at night? Nothing. I don't have 9:30 go to sleep, but I go to sleep about 9:30. And I wake up without an alarm clock at 4:30. Now, all I have to do from 4:30 on, A, say my prayers, and B, open the book and see what it says.
All right. What one piece of advice do you have to everyone out there, not just people that are selling, but everyone? Just one piece in 60 seconds.
Study people, see what they're really about. Bill Patrick, my boss in the Holiday Magic days, said, he's dead now, he was killed in a plane crash. He said, study people carefully, because this is the part, people are going to do what they've always done, which unfortunately in many cases is nothing. But people can do what they've always done. I've said many times, if I were going to build a brand new sales organization from the ground up, this really isn't practical, but I could make it happen. I would start out with a list of people who had been Eagle Scouts. And then, although there's one currently terribly disappointing me, I would then find a list of astronauts and fighter pilots, disciplined, trained, razor's edge, smart as hell, or they wouldn't have been doing any of those things. And I found out when I was attitude coach for the astronauts, I found out many of them had been Eagle Scouts. They would have been on 2 of my lists. So you find people who win, have been winning, and ask them to come over here and work with us and win here. I'm good at turning people's lives around. I've helped do that with lots of folks. But if I were building a sales organization, I wouldn't go to San Quentin to start. There's easier ways.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, for whatever reason, they want to book a seminar, they want to talk show, they want to buy your books, how can they find you?
Well, if they want to buy the books, get out something to write on, just go to eBay. And on eBay, go to Ronzoni Books, all one word. RONZONEBOOKS. ROOKS, Ronzoni Books. And that'll take you to the website that has all of my books. And at Ronzoni Books, there are special pricing. I can't control what you pay from somebody else. But at Ronzoni Books, there's special pricing, free shipping domestically in the United States, free shipping. They're all signed by me personally and dated, not rubber stamp, signed by me and dated. And they all come with an unconditional lifetime money-back guarantee, no questions asked. We've sold millions of books, Emmanuel. Guess how many returns we've had? Two grand total. So I feel pretty safe in offering that. So that's how you do that. Then if you want me to join you on a podcast or speak to your people, live seminars are pretty much out of reach price-wise and the number I'll do. But it's worth a try. Maybe something will have happened. Just shoot me an email. My email is B as in Ben, F as in Frank, G as in gay, the numeral 3, BFG3 at DirectCon. That's short for Direct Connect. So BFG at DirectCon.net. Shoot me an email and put something in the headline. Put a manual in the headline so I know it came from a source I trust. I get 300 or 400 emails a day. I open less than 30 of them because I've seen that. I know that person is a time waster. I don't want to have you book things for me that I know you can't book and I don't need. Well, those, you see those all. There's 40 emails you get several times a day from different people. I don't open them. So make the subject line intriguing. A manual would do that.
All right. Thank you so much. Well said. I have to say that your insight, your story, your wisdom are very incredible. And I know all our listeners, all our audience will benefit immensely from everything that you've shared. And let me tell you something. This is the first time that I'm doing a podcast this long. This is the longest ever. But you see, it's the value that matters. And that's why for me, anyone and everyone that's going to be listening to this, we get something out of it. It's good. And that's why, again, I say thank you so much for coming through. Thank you for sharing. And I believe there is still going to be more interaction. There's still going to be more that we're going to be talking about. But we want to wish you well as you continue to give back, as you continue to help other people grow, as you continue to help people to develop. I think I would say more grace to your _HERBL. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
You didn't quit your day job to become a full-time admin assistant. The Intelligence Forge podcast is sponsored by Permasize AI Forge. At Permasize AI Forge, we know you didn't start your business to spend 60 hours a week on paperwork, chasing leads, and managing endless admin tasks. You started it to build something meaningful and serve your clients. But right now, you're trapped in the day-to-day grind instead of growing your business. What if I told you our clients are reclaiming 15, 20 hours per week, increasing their revenue by 30 to 50% within 6, 12 months, and finally getting their lives back? We don't just automate random tasks. We build custom AI systems that eliminate the bottlenecks choking your growth, from leads generation to lead, nurturing and management to project management, to client follow-ups. Stop paying for an expensive, frustrating manual system. It's time to upgrade to strategic automation. Visit PermasizeAIForge.com and book your free business transformation strategy call today. Discover exactly how much time and money you're losing to manual processes and how to get both back. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Intelligence Forge, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode packed with game-changing insights. Your future automated business is waiting.